everybody, Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time we've got the Revival Season 1 Episode 11, which is called The Greek. So this one starts out with a bunch of guys loading up a yacht full of medical supplies, with another man watching quietly from above. The man above is alerted to the presence of a small fishing boat approaching the yacht, fires a shot which blows up the boat. Jim goes to a brewery and uses some spy speak to find his disc player. The mission. The man on the fishing boat was an agent who was performing surveillance on the yacht. The supervising man who killed him is Socrates Kolonadis, a Greek tycoon who uses his yacht to steal medical supplies needed in third world countries and then sell them for profit in international waters. The IMF must neutralize him. No apartment scene this time. The IMF assembles at a hideout in Greece, apparently, where there is a quick impromptu briefing about an upcoming meeting Kolonadis is having with some of his key people. Nicholas impersonates one of Kolonadis' British contacts, says that he's having some issues getting out of the country, so will send a representative in his place, transmitting Jim's picture for authentication. Grant takes the place of Kolonadis' new African supplier, Joseph Salud, and is introduced to the other buyers, one of whom, Woodward, seems somewhat leery and contemptuous of him for some reason. Nicholas, as a fisherman, comes close enough to the yacht that he can use a recorder to hear some of the conversations and get some audio of Kolonadis and his girlfriend Serena. Meanwhile, Max scuba dives under the boat to wrap some nets around the propeller, preventing it from moving away from shore. The first discussion among the Kolonadis cartel is fairly strained, with Grant as Salud saying he wants a bigger cut of the money. Kolonadis trying to reassert himself as a kingpin of the organization, with Woodward still being a little bit of a loudmouth, and it gets even worse when Kolonadis breaks the news that the yacht is stuck for the night instead of being able to sail out to international waters, where business can be conducted without pesky laws and being overheard, and despite Woodward's protests, insists that everyone join him at a local tavern for entertainment. At said tavern, Serena sings while Casey as a flower vendor records her, and then later she and Nicholas use her voice patterns to generate some of their own audio. Jim tells Woodward that the flirtatious Serena seems to have eyes for him, and sets the two of them up to sit next to each other while Kolonadis demonstrates a Greek dance, quite unhappy to see them laughing with each other. While the tavern fun is happening, Max and Casey manage to get on the yacht and into Woodward's cabin, and Kolonadis cuts the evening short, with Jim giving Woodward a spiked drink and trying to both keep things calm and stir things up. When the group returns to the yacht, Kolonadis sends Serena to the room and says he has to attend to business. Woodward is predictably tired thanks to being drugged by the IMF and collapses on his bed. Grant calls it a night, and Jim tells the other two buyers that he'd like to have a private word with them. Max and Casey take Woodward away, leaving a tape in his room, while Grant sneaks into Kolonadis' quarters and uses a device to find his safe, taking his record book away. While Jim and others walk by Woodward's cabin, they hear Serena's voice from the tape lamenting how lonely she is. Later, one of the staff finds that Woodward is missing, presumably tossed overboard, and there's predictable finger-pointing amongst the men, but Kolonadis sees Serena's perfumed scarf near a lamp and ventures off on his own. Jim tells the others that maybe they just found a motive for Woodward's disappearance. Serena is upset at Kolonadis' news, but he realizes that she's not promiscuous and something is being set up. He can't figure out by who or why, but it must be to muscle him out of the business. He tells the captain to head back to harbor. Meanwhile, Woodward wakes up in a room with Nicholas, who says he's the real Patterson from Australia, as Serena's singing is heard in the distance. Nicholas says he discovered from Kolonadis' records that he was cheating them all, and that's why he plans to get rid of the two of them. Grant scans the records from Kolonadis' book and changes some of the numbers, reprinting the sheets and putting them back in the book. The captain discovers that someone on board is using electronic equipment that interferes with the ship's equipment, and Kolonadis orders a search, but Grant is able to evade the searchers. Nicholas and Woodward break out of their cell, and Max shoots Nicholas during the escape, but Woodward dashes off for the harbor where the yacht has just docked. Grant puts the doctored record book back in Kolonadis' safe, but is forced to hide in the tub full of bubble bath when he and Serena return, having an argument, holding his breath and barely managing to get out, in a funny moment. Woodward calls Jim thinking he can be trusted and asks him to bring Grant to meet him at the tavern, and they decide to cut their own deal, leaving the others out. Woodward tells him about meeting the real but now dead Patterson, confirming that Colonnades has been playing games. The three of them confront a confused Colonnades, demanding to see the records, which of course confirm the chicanery. Grant offers to go get his own books to cross-reference, and Jim says he'll go with him. They take the opportunity to head off the boat into the waiting IMF car, as the resulting gunplay results in the whole pack of dealers apparently killing each other. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of D. I had to think about it and kind of compare it to the some of the episodes that have come before, like The Haunting and The Cattle King. And I think it kind of fits in the middle of those, in a sense. I think it's a little bit better than The Haunting, maybe not quite as good as The Cattle King. I find it, I can't even really put it in terms, the things that I want to discuss, I can't even really put them in terms of kind of good and bad. I can only talk about what's going on here in kind of a general sense. This is an episode that has a really strange vibe compared to almost any episode I've ever seen, to be very honest with you. We have a situation where the IMF is not really relying so much on gadgetry. It's not even about how it normally is, just kind of staying one step ahead of the bad guys. It's kind of about using psychology, which some episodes are definitely based on, but usually when the IMF uses heavy psychology or even not so heavy psychology, it's more to extract information out of people that they're unwilling to give. Here, they are using psychological techniques, but it's mostly just, I don't know how else to say it. Really, all they're doing is they've got a group of bad guys who are, a cartel of sorts, and they're just stirring the pot amongst them. They're working together. They have this kind of uneasy, unholy alliance. Especially, they make it's a little bit over the top and too obvious to me. The whole thing between Woodward being a real disturber with Colonnades and the rest of them. And they just basically exploit that. That's all they do. And they just let things take their course. They just fool them and use the most obvious method of saying, hey, the guy's cheating you. Oh my God, he's cheating me? Well, I'll go take care of that. And there's not even really any skill or finesse involved in that. Colonnades is completely overmatched. And this is not even one that I've complained about in previous episodes, in the revival and in the original, where the IMF seems to have unlimited resources. They do, but they don't even need them in this case. All they need to do is to just put a few things out there to set these guys who are already ready to rumble, in a sense, and just let nature take its course. With Colonnades, it's not even about being a lame schmuck. And in some episodes that have been, similar to this in terms of what the IMF needs to accomplish, I've mentioned that they use a ridiculous amount of gaslighting to do it. They don't even need to use a ridiculous amount of it. Colonnades never had a chance against the IMF. That's my biggest problem with this one. There is 0 degree of difficulty in this. From the point of view of just being like a television episode to watch, it's okay, but it really reminds me more of kind of like, a crime drama or something like that, rather than an episode of Mission Impossible. If I were to think of a callback for this episode, the first one that I thought of was the episode The Deal from season 7, mostly because it took place on a boat, and the IMF was kind of like playing some psychological games with the characters. In terms of structure, it was a little bit like that. I also thought of that episode because in that episode I mentioned in the review for that, I mentioned that the characters are not really that engaging, and I find the same thing here. Other than Nicholas Hammond as Woodward being really, really in your face, very, very deliberately his character is written that way, I'm really not interested in seeing what happens with these guys. However, in terms of a better callback, I think one of the better ones that I can compare this to is the episode from season 2 that is called The Widow. That was similar in the sense that you had two guys who were partners, and they were involved in the drug business, and the IMF had to break up a big deal that was taking place. So, in terms of the way the mission is laid out, very, very similar. But in that episode, The Widow, that actually involved the IMF doing what they normally do. That was the first separate and mislead plot. The IMF had to stay a step ahead. They had to outsmart the bad guys. However, in the end, the bad guys, they are outsmarted, and then the IMF just kind of leaves, like they do in this episode, and then just let them duke it out, and we hear, the gunshot off screen, basically indicating to us, mission accomplished. I find this episode to be similar to that, at least in the sense of the way that the ending is structured, but there's no comparison in terms of the quality of the setup. And I've just kind of explained that here about why I feel that way. It's just so simple for the IMF to just set the bad guys against each other and just let them do the dirty work. Jim and Grant basically do all the work on the boat. Nicholas has a bit of a thing to play, but Max and Casey are basically just along for the ride, just kind of as extra bodies. And that is not the sign of a great episode, where really only two of the characters are really doing anything, and Nicholas has, a fairly minor part. There could have been more here, and the producers decided to go one way rather than going in more of the IMF direction. And that's what I feel about this one. Just in terms of some things that I did find good, I was a funny moment where we had Grant who had to hide out in Colonnades' bubble bath, in order to avoid being seen. I think that Phil Morris is actually pretty good in this episode. He gets to shine a little bit here. I liked Cesar De Nova as Colonnades. He's good on the screen. Like I've seen him play the kind of role that he plays in this episode gazillions of times. He was in almost every drama of the 60s, 70s, and 80s as this kind of, crime boss, international crime boss, because, he has the accent and so forth that can cover a lot of bases in that regard. And the other actors are fine, nothing wrong with them, but I'm really just not interested in the characters in this one. And I just find this to be a really kind of ho-hum episode overall. A little bit better in terms of the story department, I would say, than The Haunting, and that's why I'm going to settle on my grade of D for this one. So that's about it. Shorter review than most. That will not be the case for the next one, which will be coming soon. Thank you guys again for watching. Please like this video review. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you get notifications when new videos come out. And please leave your comments about this and other episodes. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.